Everyone has a story. Stories have power. They help us understand each other. This is Jessop's Journal. Dr. Jones, it's time to sign into Jessop's Journal. Hi, I'm Doug Jessop. Welcome to this episode of Jessop's Journal. With me today, Dr. Lon Jones. Dr. Jones, number one, thank you very much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
True confession, I have been looking forward to interviewing you for quite some time because, truth be told, I know your son, and you have a pretty cool legacy that we're going to get into in a little bit. But I wanted to find out a little bit more about you first. Number one, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Southern California, Los Angeles area, Highland Park specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Graduated from Benjamin Franklin High School. Had a paper route, delivered papers 3 times a week, early morning paper route. Got to watch the skies light up from the Nevada test site periodically.
Wow.
And that put me on my track of becoming a scientist so I could make more bombs and bigger bombs and better bombs. And then had a life-changing story when went on a mission for the Mormon Church. I realized that people were more important than bombs, lots more important. So the proper study of people is history. And so I studied history and got a degree from Brigham Young University in history. Went to the University of Washington to study the history of science and ideas, and pursued that to a master's degree. And then I got a job in middle of the year, couldn't get a job teaching. So I got a job with the Pacific Northwest Bell and went to their business management training sessions. That taught me more about people and more about how important they are. But I didn't want to live in a big city because we had a family and families are important, and my wife came from a little town. She wanted a little town experience for our kids, so how do you do that? About that time my third daughter was born, and I got to watch and said, I can handle this. And ever since, in church one time they showed us a movie of the evils of smoking, where these doctors did a pneumonectomy on this guy and they were up to their elbows in blood. And I literally got sick, and from then on, if anybody told me I should be a doctor, which a lot of people did, I said, heck with you.
Yeah.
And not so many friendly terms.
Yeah, okay.
When my third daughter was born, Patty, it was a nice experience. And so I went to medical school, and I looked at medical schools, and I was old, and they didn't want old people in medical school because if they get them younger, they are doctors longer, despite the fact that they don't know anything about people.
Yeah, okay.
Anyway, osteopathic medicine was different, and osteopathic medicine was more what I was looking for because they go into smaller towns. They are based on the idea that if your body is working right, and they looked at the structure their paradigm was Newtonian. And if the structure is working right, then the body will be working right. So they concentrated on structure. And there's a lot to that, but there's also a lot that they ignore by focusing on structure. And that's what I brought. I think I brought that from my study of this history of science and medicine.
So you were a family physician?
I was a family physician.
For how long?
Close to 40 years.
Wow. Well, number one, thank you very much for everything you do.
You bet.
So this is a loaded question, but do you have any clue as to about how many people you've probably seen in your practice over the years?
Oh, no.
A lot. So have you delivered babies?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Any idea how many babies you think you've delivered?
Oh, probably a dozen, maybe.
Okay. So not too bad, but okay. So now
that was the first part of my practice. And
okay.
And then I started doing emergency medicine.
Oh my goodness.
Halfway through.
Ooh.
And so I did emergency medicine probably half of that 40 years.
Really? I got to think that you got to have some serious. You talk about, the little smoking video. Man, you must have seen all kinds of stuff. Then, with the emergency stuff. Is there anything in particular that kind of stood out in those practices? Things that you saw that you're going, I wonder, is this something that maybe shouldn't be happening and maybe we could help prevent?
Sure.
You want to help share?
That's a loaded question.
Yes, it is. Well,
When I started was in 1973.
Okay.
And in the early 70s is when they were doing research in third world countries for cholera. Cholera is a disease that was killing lots and lots and lots of people. And it doesn't kill you because you're infected with cholera. It kills you because your immune system recognizes this toxin in your GI tract as something that will kill you. And your immune system says, I need to wash this out.
Okay.
And so people don't die of cholera infection per se, they die of dehydration. And what they found out in this period of time back in 1970 was that if you drink a combination of sugar, salt, and water in the right proportions, it turns a little mechanism on in your stomach that pumps that water into your system. So it's a simple, easy, effective way of keeping your water tank full. And it saved millions of lives of people with cholera. The English Medical Journal, name escapes me, said that in 10 years it saved more lives than penicillin did in 40.
Wow.
And that's accurate.
Well, now
So that recipe, you can make it in your kitchen. 3 tablespoons of sugar, teaspoon of salt, a liter of water, mix it up, drink it, sip it. If you're sick to your stomach, sip it smaller, but still sip it more regularly. This mechanism even works when you're sick to your stomach. The recommendation of the CDC, it's recommended by the CDC and it's recommended by the World Health Organization for treating gastrointestinal disturbances, but people don't use it. People don't know about it.
There was something we talked about off camera that I want you to kind of help me walk through. There was a study that was done about life expectancy, and you showed me a chart. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, this University of Oregon has this section where they look at things like that, and they have a chart showing life expectancy from 1850 to 2000. And there are irregularities in it because the Civil War disturbed life expectancy, but over the average of 1850 to 1970, there was an increase in life expectancy of about 3 years for every decade. And it's pretty regular. In 1970, it decreased to about 2.5. In 1990, it decreased a little bit more, and the last couple of years we've had decreases actually in life expectancy because of the drug suicides and because of COVID.
Okay.
But why does what happened in those periods of time, and people will look at it and say, well, we ran out of things to do. We didn't run out of things to do. We changed our interest. In 1965, we started Medicare, and 1965 Medicare broadened health insurance window. Health insurance started in Texas at the beginning of the Depression, when the teachers union bought into Baylor Health System. So they paid they paid an insurance premium, and that got expanded into Blue Cross and Blue Shield, and that got expanded further by the car industry after World War II, and then that blossomed into Medicare and all the other. But what it did was change the interest of the industry from helping people stay healthy to what we can do with this insurance premium to make more money. We commodified medicine, and that's a mistake. We shouldn't have done it. And now we're saying that we don't care that much about life expectancy, except the people that want to freeze themselves to.
So what do you think needs to be done?
That's a little involved story. First of all, I'd stop the warfare. And that gets back to what we started with, is this Xlear, because that's warfare with bacteria. And way back when we started that war, from the history of medicine point of view, is with Louis Pasteur. Louis Pasteur showed us these germs that caused illness and disease. And he said, look, they're microscopic, they're weak, they're vulnerable, they're everything else. And so we can fight them and we can do something. And so our goal ever since then has been to fight these bacteria and these viruses. So we have all kinds of ways of destroying them. But these are the foundation of life on Earth. These bacteria and viruses shaped the environment of Earth to make it habitable for us. They are not weak and vulnerable. They can mutate, which is their primary mode of defense and offense. And since we've been fighting them with antibiotics and all of the safe things we put on our kitchen counters to kill them, we've had a blossoming of emerging infectious diseases, and COVID is probably an example of that. I don't know that for sure, but when you threaten and when you kill bacteria, bacteria in a colony sense that their numbers are diminishing, and they send out a signal by corporate quorum sensing is the word I'm looking for. Quorum sensing is sent out, and half of the colony start mutating and find an answer. Not all of them, because that's suicidal, but a certain number of the bacteria start mutating, and they quickly find an answer. When they find an answer, what do? Well, they don't put a patent on it.
Okay. Oh, come on.
They share it with their progeny. They multiply, so it's spread horizontally and vertically. And there's no way we can keep up. We want to make a profit off of our novelty. That's our interest. So, are we going to win this game? No. This is a cosmic war. It's as close to a cosmic war as we've ever heard of or been in. And Risa Aslan wrote a book on how to win a cosmic war. The bottom line was, don't get in one.
You were a family physician, you're an emergency physician, and sometimes it's just the simple things that, you're going, oh, it can't be that simple, because if it's that simple, nobody's going to do it. But you guys came up with this Xylitol spray and the Xylitol thing. Tell me more about that.
That started back in 1996. Our granddaughter was born in March, and in September, Mom went back to teaching school, and granddaughter went to daycare, where she promptly started getting ear infections. And my wife, Jerry Bozeman, from her experience in teaching special ed, knew that when kids have recurring ear infections when they're babies, they wind up often having trouble learning language and speaking and reading.
Oh, yeah.
And the reason for that is because every time a child has or a person has an ear infection, your body responds to that by building up fluid to try and wash out that infection. That fluid is in your middle ear. And what happens in your middle ear when that fluid builds up is it hurts. If the bacteria are in your middle ear, and they are there long enough to build up a biofilm, which is what happens when their colony can protect itself. And that's another quorum sensing issue, because bacteria, first of all, have to find a place to hold on. Second of all, they have to avoid your immune system while they're multiplying. Thirdly, when they get to be a colony, they are interested in protecting themselves. So when that colony gets big enough, quorum sensing happens again, and they start building a matrix over that colony, which is called a biofilm. And antibiotics don't penetrate that matrix. So when you get an antibiotic, yeah, it kills all the bacteria around that, but the bacteria go in their home and they're safe. And when you stop taking the antibiotic, they stick their noses out and said, hey, it's safe again. so they cause another infection. You take more antibiotics, they go back in their home, antibiotic wears off, they go back again. So you have recurring ear infections.
So what's the solution?
The solution is to go back to the beginning and get rid of it.
How?
And not, so that's what xylitol seems to do. And the first thing it does, it makes it so that the bacteria, what bacteria hold on to, first step, is sugars on our cell surfaces. And xylitol, it looks like sugar, it tastes like sugar, but it's not sugar. And most bacteria that eat us, that infect us, can't tolerate xylitol because it has 5 carbons instead of the 6 that we are built with. And so these bacteria can't eat xylitol, and they can't hold on to it either because they're looking at 6 carbon sugars. But xylitol is flexible, and it can fit into a lot of those little hands that the bacteria use to find sugars. And if it fits close enough, it's a good decoy, and they hold on to it and they don't hold on to us. If on the biofilm, the bacteria are holding on to the sugars on our cell surfaces, and the xylitol gets into those places and gets into those little hands, pretty soon you're ripping off the biofilm, and pretty soon it goes away. Gave it to my granddaughter, her ear infections went away. Pretty good. Son says you ought to patent this. I got a patent on the nasal use of xylitol. I started using it in more cases. I had a niece that was having asthma. Her brother was having ear infections. So Mom called us, talked to us, and said, would it help her daughter too? I don't know, it won't hurt her. So I gave it to her, and 2 weeks later, after using it 3 or 4 times a day, 2 weeks later, Mom was washing her hair, and she started vomiting and regurgitating and coughing and sputtering, and she coughed up this mass of what Mom thought she was losing her brains, which was probably a biofilm from her sinuses. And a week later, no asthma. Mom took her off all of her medicine, no asthma. 6 months later, she's playing basketball and doing gymnastics with no asthma.
Wow.
And my daughter called me from Florida. We got to go visit Grandma, the other grandma, and Joe's allergic to her cat. What should I do? I said, you know, get a motel. Anyway, I sent her a bottle, and Joe used it 3 or 4 times a day, was able to stay there with Grandma. The only trouble he had was first thing in the morning when he woke up after 8 hours of sleep. He was a little bit boggy, and that went away within half an hour after using Xlear. So what does Xlear do? Xlear restores your natural defenses to your nasopharyngeal cleaning mechanism. And that cleaning mechanism is based on the cilia, the little microscopic hairs that sweep out the mucus. So the mucus holds on to all the foreign garbage, the cilia sweep it out. Both of those processes are dependent on the airway surface fluid. And the airway surface fluid is there so the cilia can sweep in that fluid, just like seaweed sweeps in the ocean. And that fluid provides the water for the mucus, which is secreted in very concentrated form. It absorbs up to 200 times its volume to become the mucus that works. So if you have an adequate airway surface fluid, your nasal defenses are working optimally.
I've been using your nasal spray for a lot of years, and apparently there's a quote-unquote right way and wrong way to do nasal spray. What's the what would Dr. Jones say? What's the best way to use this?
When you spray your nose, look at your toes.
Ah.
And where this works in your nose is in the very back parts of your nose. So at the same time as you're inserting this in your nose and looking at your toes, and you spray, make a vigorous sniff. So sniff at the same time as you spray. That moves it to the back of your nose where it's effective.
Oh, really?
And if you do that 2 or 3 times a day, your nose will probably stay in that optimal zone.
So Dr. Jones, winding up here, you know, this is my journal. It's Jessop's journal.
Okay.
And these guys have a hashtag. that says, leave your mark. So, because, you know, mine's got all kinds of marks on it, and that's kind of life. To me, life kind of comes with scars. So the question I like to ask everybody, I'm going to ask you, how do you want to leave your mark?
My wife and I are incorporated as Common Sense Medicine. And if you're interested in looking more at it, it's commonsensemedicine.org, all one word. Common Sense Medicine is looking at our defenses. It's looking at what we can do to be healthier. And that's my mark.
Well, thank you very much for coming on. And there's a couple other people I want to thank. Of course, we got the folks with you know, Restico that make my journal. You know, we do have the folks from Five Wives. They make hand sanitizer and adult beverages. You wash your hands, but have you ever thought about washing your nose? I mean, this is the guy right here that came up with this Xlear nasal spray. It's great stuff, washes away all the nasties. Okay, and then of course,
I need to put something on that.
Yeah, what's that?
If you can.
What's that?
There is a lot of people talking about washing your nose now.
Yeah.
And they do so aggressively.
Okay.
And when you do so aggressively, you wash out the good bacteria as well as the bad bacteria.
Oh.
Talal Nasuli is an ENT doctor in Washington, D.C., who took care of President Clinton and his allergies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he did a study looking at what happened when people with chronic sinus infections used a neti pot, which is aggressively washing your nose out.
Right.
And they got more infections than less. And he did another study because a lot of his patients were telling him about Xlear, and he presented that a couple of years ago at the conference in Texas, San Antonio, and he showed that people that use this just twice a day, over a month, their chronic sinus is better.
Twice a day. Okay. And then of course we have Taylor Cooperative, and don't forget JW Custom Hats. With another entry into Jessop's journal and Dr. Lon Jones, I'm Doug Jessop, ABC4 News.